again, an opportunity to get together and gather, and we just thank you for the rain. We just pray, again, that you would take care of those who are damaged in the storms, help them to get back on their feet quickly, and we just, again, pray, Lord, that you would just bless our time and our conversation. In your son's name, amen. Amen. All right, Unit 8. So we are on the second half of our 14-week journey through this, and we are literally following up the Unit 7, where we basically started with the Mark, do you guys need a copy of this?
Yeah.
Did you get last week's?
Yes, we got last week.
Okay, great, excellent. So, where we started with the Elohim and humanity being wiped out in the flood, into the Tower of Babel, into the calling of Israel, i.e. calling of Abraham. So we're going to pick up on those materials and wrap that up today. And what's fun is when we get done with today, the kingdom exists, which is really kind of cool. But obviously we're only at Unit 8, so something goes wrong. Called foreshadowing. Anyway, so we have this, as we're going to go through the materials and things like this, I'm going to basically sort of ask this kind of question, right? What is the purpose of the law from God's perspective? So if you go off and you take a look and we sit there and say, hey, he gives us the Mosaic covenant, how would you guys go off and answer this question? What is the purpose of the law from God's perspective?
To show you can't do it.
That's Paul's perspective. Paul would sit there and say the law is a mirror, right? It's there to demonstrate the fact that you cannot save yourself, and it is a means to convict and condemn.
Right. To point us to Christ.
What is the
To point us towards Christ is the one who can.
Well, that's again,
supersede the law.
but that's back, I think, to what Paul's point is, right?
I think it's to protect us
Okay.
from doing things that are going to harm us and getting involved in things that we should not be.
Involved
He
in.
says, don't go mess with those Nephilim, as you would call them, those other people. And
Yeah.
and it's so to show the Israelites what he's expecting of them.
Exactly right. Can I get somebody to read Deuteronomy 4, 6 through 8?
I got it.
Got it? Let her rip.
You shall keep and do them, for that is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the peoples who will hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. For what great nation is there that has a God so near to it as is Yahweh our God whenever we call on him? Or what great nation is there that has statutes and judgments as righteous as this whole law which I am setting before you today?
Great. It says there, it said, they will be a demonstration to who? What was the word? The peoples. Okay? You ever hear the word peoples and nation? That's somebody outside of Israel, right? They're a demonstration. The Mosaic code is given to them so that they can be what? Distinct, unique, and to your point, attractive, because they're not putting up with all the nonsense of sort of living in their own, wisdom, if that makes sense, right? And so from that perspective, this is the point of the law, I think from God's perspective, as he gives it in the Mosaic code, right? Isaiah 49:6, obviously if somebody will take a look at that, but that's the thing where it sits there and says what? It is too little a thing for my servant to do what? Save Israel. So therefore he's going to be what? A light to the nations. And my salvation will extend to everybody and everything. Right? This is the idea, again, to sit there and say the Mosaic code is given for what? To make Israel distinct, unique. How does that then play into Genesis 12:3? Which is what we covered last time, Unit 7. Genesis 12:3, do y'all remember it? And you will be a blessing to
Be a blessing to the nations.
yeah, all nations, right? How does this play then into Genesis 12:3? It's literally what it says right there, right?
Sure.
It's Israel is established, is created as the means to draw all of the nations back to Yahweh. And that's its point. And so if we don't have that in mind as we move through this, then this isn't going to make as much sense. So Deuteronomy 28, 1 through 2. Now it will be, if you diligently listen to the voice of Yahweh your God, be careful to do all his commandments, which I am commanding you today. Yahweh your God will set you high above all the nations of the earth. And all these blessings will come upon you and overtake you if you listen to the voice of Yahweh your God. What does this mean when we look at this? This is the first time we've looked at the covenant that looks like this in this study.
Conditional.
Conditions, conditionality, right? So we talked about contingency in Unit 4 as being a necessary component of this, right? But this is the first time we see these if-then statements. If you do this, then I will do blah, blah, blah. And it's good and bad. So as you looked at Deuteronomy 28, and I gave you a couple of little things, did anybody come up with something that really struck them when they looked at Deuteronomy 28 that you'd like to share? What are some of the things that are contingent on their possession, their favor, their outcomes?
The blessings were dependent on their obedience.
Mm-hmm.
And then if they weren't obedient, they would get all their curses. So it was exactly the opposite. There was a parallelism between, if you do this, then I will.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't, then the opposite, you know.
Now, how many times as parents did you feel like you spent more times explaining to your kids what they shouldn't do than what they did do, or what they should do, right? You shouldn't do this. You spend a lot of time in that column. You should do this, gets a little bit of space.
Let's go some of that shouldn't stuff is gonna kill them. So,
That's
play
right.
in the street, don't on stove.
And I would bet, knowing me and you, that we did what? We
Never,
challenged
never,
that a lot,
never.
right?
Never.
You never challenged that? That's right. I challenged a lot of the to-do nots, right?
Always.
Always, right? And I needed to hear it 2 or 3, 4 times. What's interesting, Deuteronomy 28, it's about 2 to 1. The verses of curses are about twice the number of the verses of blessings. Because we're what?
Stupid.
Exactly, stupid. All right. Now, there's more to that, though, because again, we're trying to look at this through a kingdom lens. This is Deuteronomy 28. I just threw out a couple of things, blessings and cursings, again, to your idea of parallelism, right? Again, if you do well, your offspring, your produce, your herds will be blessed. You'll have health and well-being. There will be peace. You'll have victory over your enemies. There'll be economic prosperity. Of course, if you don't do it, then you're going to have what? Barrenness. You'll have lack, want, disease. There will be conflict. You'll experience loss, destruction, and waste. Forget this, what do those sound like from a kingdom perspective?
The millennial kingdom?
That's exactly right. Unit 3, we talked about the blessings of the kingdom. So we talked about the elements of the kingdom, right? Isaiah 30, 23 through 24. He will give you rain for the seed which you will sow in the ground, bread from the produce of the ground. It will be rich and fat, and on that day your livestock will graze in a roomy pasture. Also the oxen and the donkeys will work the ground, and they will eat salted fodder, which has been winnowed with shovel and fork. Again, this idea of prosperity, personal well-being, Isaiah 65, 22. For as the lifetime of a tree, so will be the days of my people, and my chosen ones will wear out the work of their hands, right? Health and well-being, personal protection and peace, Psalm 91, 11 through 13. He will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. On their hands they will bear you up, lest you strike your foot against a stone. You will tread upon the fierce lion and the cobra, the young lion and the serpent you will trample down. Again, wars, Psalm 46, 9 through 10. He makes wars to cease upon the earth. He breaks the bow and cuts up the spear. He burns the chariots with fire. Cease striving and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. Isaiah 65, 21, economic prosperity, personal security. They will build houses and inhabit them. They will also plant vineyards and eat their fruit. They will not build and another inhabit. They will not plant and another eat. This is why I'm saying, if they follow this, what's the result? The kingdom comes. Right? So, one of the important parts about this is that Israel has a foreign policy that's very unique. Right? We just had this past week, Sweden joined NATO. Speaking of contemporary events and foreign policies, right? What's the point of Sweden joining NATO? Anybody in here want to summarize that in like 30 seconds?
They don't wanna get their butts kicked.
They're close to Russia.
What?
They don't wanna get.
Their butts kicked because they're close to
Russia.
Russia. Exactly right. And
Number one reason.
Russia doesn't seem to have real respect for border integrity and things like this, right? And so it obligates us to defend Sweden if Russian tanks go across the border, blah, 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 right? Now, is that how Israel was supposed to conduct their foreign relations?
No,
No,
we're
not.
not supposed to make any treaties with any other nations. We're supposed to rely on God.
That's exactly right. And this is Deuteronomy 23, 8 through 9. How shall I curse whom God has cursed? By the way, this is, what's his bucket? Never mind. What do you Balak and Balaam and whatnot. And how can I denounce whom Yahweh has not denounced? For I see him from the top of the rocks, and I look at him from the hills. Behold, a people who dwells alone and will not be reckoned among the nations. Again, back to that same idea that if you follow these things, you'll be what? The top of the nations. You'll be the top of the heap, right? And again, why were they not supposed to involve themselves with other nations in these sort of treaties? What comes with being with the other nations?
Because you would intermarry with them, you would take on their culture and their policies. You would become just like them.
That's exactly right. And the biggest part is if you intermarry, you bring over what? The gods. This is some George covered, right? This idea of the fallen Elohim in Deuteronomy are basically given what? The number of these fallen angels are basically put over all of the countries, and so you can assume there's 70 some odd of these regions running these things, and we get that insight in Daniel. Well, if I bring in that country in some way, shape, or form, I bring in its god or gods, right? And that's not the point, right? So we get to the conquest. And it says in Deuteronomy 20, 10 through 18, thus you shall do to all the cities that are very far from you, which are not the cities of these nations nearby. Only in the cities of these people that Yahweh your God has given to you as an inheritance, you shall not leave anything alive that breathes, but you shall devote them to destruction, the Hittite, the Amorite, the Canaanite, the Perizzite, Hivite, Jebusite, as Yahweh your God has commanded you, so that they may not teach you to do according to all their abominations which they have done for their gods, so that you would sin against Yahweh your God. This is a unique approach to warfare, right? In that it's what? It's the ultimate version of scorched earth. What's left over when you invade these people? Nothing. You get the spoils, but the spoils don't even include the kids or the wives, right? Generally speaking, Assyria comes in and sits there and says, hey, you know what? We're going to attack you, and your wives and children will be our slaves. Titus comes in, destroys Jerusalem in 70 AD. What happens? Leads a boatload of Israelites north back toward Europe, etc., etc. In this case, wiping them all out.
Am I correct in saying that the specific the commandment was very specific to these ites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites? It was only, like, there was also other commandments of, hey, you can kill all the men, but you can take leave the women and children alive. But for these nations specifically,
exactly right,
it was burn them to the ground.
That's right, burn them to the ground. In verse 17 of this Deuteronomy, the verb for dedicate to destruction or exterminate is haram, right? And it has like a K sign on it, so it'd be haram or something like this anyway. Deuteronomy 2:34, that verb is applied to Shahan, king of Heshbon, which we'll see in a bit. He's on north of Moab. Deuteronomy 3:6, it's dedicated to the kingdom of Og and Bashan, which we're about to go into. Deuteronomy 7:2, it's the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, just like we see here. In Deuteronomy 13:15, it is the idolaters in the land who do what? Introduce idolatry into their city. Not only is the idolater to be destroyed, the city is to be destroyed inside of Israel. Dedicated to destruction. Again, back to this idea to sit there and say what? No other gods before me. First command. Right?
Hey, Thomas,
Yes, sir.
is that the verse that's currently being used by Israel to attack Gaza?
don't know if they're cognizant of that, because the version of Israel that exists today is much more secular. So we have next door neighbors who are Jewish in the sense of their bloodline is Jewish, but they are absolutely not Jews. They're Israelis. If you ask them, what are you? We're Israeli. Secular from that perspective.
Even the religious Jews in Israel stick to the Pentateuch, right? So, now this is Deuteronomy as part of that,
Mhm. Yeah.
but I think they have kind of spiritualized the whole thing.
Yeah, and again, I think they're embarrassed by it, right? Because again, this is one of those things where people come up through history and sit there and say, well, this is one of the reasons I can't love this God, is because look what he commands people to do. How can a just God do this? Well, that's the point of today's lesson, by the way. Okay, that's where we're driving this train. Yes,
I
sir.
just want to share something real quick. I'm new to this class, so I don't
Welcome.
Just thanks, but appreciate it. But there are Jews, Orthodox Jews, that are against the state of Israel,
Mhm.
actually, and they're persecuted by the Israeli government.
Yeah.
And they're against what Israel's doing in Gaza.
Yeah.
You know.
That's because that's the fun thing about Jews. Again, if you put 5 of them in a room, you get 8 opinions. That's the awesome thing about that, right? All right, so let's go back and let's get a running start at the bulk of what we're doing today, right? Again, from last week, we basically sat there and said the Nephilim in Noah's day are a counterfeit line. That again, Satan was given the curse that the seeds are going to do battle against each other and stuff like this, and so he's kind of aware of what's happening, right? And so as you kind of just bring this up, we have the daughters of men, and again all the Elohim on this side, and they come together and they form this counterfeit line. The Tower of Babel is a counterfeit religion. The calling of Abraham to create a nation that will fulfill the covenant is the blessing to the other nations. And the conquest and the flood share a similar goal or an outcome, which is the complete destruction of these divinized men. And that's the point. That's why this haram word is applied to these people groups, is because we're going to find that in Noah's day, that evil was widespread. That's why I do like the CSB's definition of that word. In Noah's day, that evil was widespread. Now, my contention is, it's going to be concentrated in the promised land. I really appreciate, AJ, how much you're paying attention to. AZ, I'm sorry. How much you're paying attention to me. So we're going to begin this proof in Genesis 6:5, and if you stay with me, I think you'll see that it's in plain sight here. So again, we're going to use this chart. If you noticed, yes, it works up, not down. It does work left to right, so forgive me for that. But it was 3 weeks of working on this, and this is the best I could do.
It's great.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Now, we're going to add geography, so I need you to look at your sheet and look up here, because we're going to add the geography to this, because again, I know many of you have excellent maps in your Bibles. I couldn't find a single map in any of the Bibles that I had that I thought would work really well, so I ended up creating some as we go along the way. So, let us begin. Whatever. All right, Nephilim. All right, Numbers 13:33, right? We also saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, are part of the Nephilim. We became like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in theirs, right? Now, the important part of this is, yes, we're beginning with the Nephilim, but that's our starting point, because immediately it tells us what? Who else is also part of the Nephilim? The sons of Anak, right? So which leads us on to number 2, right? The Anakim. In Joshua 14:15, now the name of Hebron was formerly Kiriath Arba, for Arba was the greatest man among the Anakim, right? So now we've learned 2 things. Where they're located, which is what city? Kiriath Arba is the name of a city, and who's the greatest of them? Arba. He in fact, he's the greatest of the Anakim, so that's pretty exciting. Now we go off and we take a little bit deeper look in the place, right? Joshua 15:13, Caleb, the son of, again, I can't pronounce his name, was given a portion among the sons of Judah according to the command of Yahweh to Joshua, namely this city, Kiriath Arba. Arba being the father of the Anak, and that is Hebron. Now that's an unusual and unfortunate way that is phrased, because again, Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, again, then Arba being the father of Anak is kind of more how the thought process works. So what have we learned now about Arba that's more interesting? He's not just the greatest, he is the what? Is what?
The father.
He is the progenitor, right? He is the original Anak, okay? So now that's a nice little bit of information, so we'll hold on to that, right? Now, moving on. Number 4. Come on, number 4. There we go. So in Deuteronomy 9:2, and I've got a longer version of it in the thing, right? He talks about, again, you're going to go in and you're going to dispossess these people. But you have heard it said, and I like this part, who can stand before the sons of Anak? Why is it that you have a problem? What's the problem with the sons of the Anakim, right? Well, notice what sits there right there and says at the beginning. They are greater and mightier than you are, and they have great cities fortified to what? Heaven. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
Babel.
That would be the Tower of Babel, right? It's the same idea, right? A people great and what? Tall. These are mighty men of renown. That's the same words used in Genesis chapter 6, right? So he sits there and says, don't worry about it because I'm going to go off and do this for you. And it's interesting because he sits there and says at the end of Deuteronomy 9:1-5, he sits there and says, look, it is not because of your righteousness or the uprightness of your heart, it's because of their wickedness. And I'm going to take care of this. We'll see this a little bit more in just a second, right? But all of this echoes both the flood and the Tower of Babel. So again, Moses is connecting these things, so should we. Then we get into the conquest proper. I give you both verses in Judges 1:10 and 1:20. Judah went up against the Canaanites who lived in Hebron. Now again, the name of Hebron was formerly Kiriath Arba, and they struck these 3 people who are the Anakim, the sons of Anak. We've seen their names before. Then they gave Hebron to Caleb as Moses has promised, and he dispossessed from there the 3 sons of Anak, right? So again, very simple, very straightforward. Everything looks like it's going along swimmingly until we get to the exception in Joshua 11:21-22. Now this is a summary statement of the conquest. Joshua came at that time and cut off the Anakim from the hill country, from Hebron, from Debir, from Anab, and from all the hill country of Judah, and from all the hill country of Israel. Joshua devoted them to destruction with their cities. They left no Anakim left in all the land of the sons of Israel. Only in Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod some remained. Now this is the important part of this whole thing. So let's take a look at the map that's up here real quick. And again, where is the hill country of Judah? Well, there's no Jerusalem at this time because it hasn't been captured. Who captures Jerusalem? David, later on, so hundreds of years later. Mount of Olives is basically where Jerusalem is, right? And then down in this area, this would be the hill country of Judah, all right? Down here is Kadesh Barnea, where they first came in to spy the land and then retreated because they saw the Anakim all through this area. So where do you think the Anakim live then? They come up this way, they're like, yep, that's a bad deal. And they come right back out and they're out. This time when they attack, they're going to do what? They're going to come across the Jordan from this direction as they move up through Edom, Moab, Ammon, etc., and come this direction. Now, I have this highlighted here, Mamre. What's Mamre?
It's where Abraham.
The Oaks of Mamre.
Oaks of Mamre, exactly right. Keep that in mind as we move forward. So we go backwards. Now we go back to our chart. Number 7, the Raphim, right? So and again, the connection here is this verse, Deuteronomy 2:11. Like the Anakim, they are also regarded as Raphim, but the Moabites call them Amim, right? Now, the Raphim are then this larger sort of a grouping of people. So if you kind of sit there and say, I'm looking at some hierarchies and things like this, the Raphim would be a larger umbrella term for these people. And they call them Raphim. Now, it's a new category. Let's move down one level and take a look at the 2 kind of things off to the top and the left of your chart, the Amim and the Zamzummim, which Zamzummim is just a fun word to say, right? It's like saying ketolaomer. Anytime you can work ketolaomer into a conversation, That's a great thing. So the Emim lived there formerly, a people as great, numerous, and tall as the Anakim. Like the Anakim, they are also regarded as Rephaim, but the Moabites called them Emim. Now, who are the Moabites?
The sons of Lot,
The sons of Lot through his
Daughter.
who was daughters.
the daughters, right? So kind of a weird whole shebang there, right? Number 9, the Zamzummim in Deuteronomy 2:20-21 is also regarded as the land of the Rephaim, for the Rephaim formerly lived in it, but the Ammonites called them Zamzummim, a people as great, numerous, and tall as the Anakim, but Yahweh destroyed them before them, and they dispossessed them and settled in their place. Why does that sound familiar? Yahweh destroyed them before them, and they dispossessed and settled in their place.
That's what they were supposed to do.
That's what Israel's called to do. It's exactly what Israel was told to do while they were sitting at Kadesh Barnea. Who's already done it?
God.
Lot's family,
Moabite.
the Ammonites and the Moabites, had more faith than the Israelites. It is an indictment of massive proportions, right? Now, we get into the region, right? This is, now again, they sat there and said, this is the land of the Rephaim. So now we're going to get into and talk about some regional components, right? Then the border went up to the valley of Ben Haman to the slope of the Jebusite on the south. That is Jerusalem. The border went up to the top of the mountains, which is before the valley of Hinnom on the west, which is at the end of the valley of the Rephaim to the north, Joshua 15:18. Where in the wide world of sports is that? Well, we're going to see here in just a second. You can barely see it right here. I'll come up in a second. The valley of Rephaim is the title of this. It exists between Jerusalem and Bethlehem. Right there in that area, okay? Samuel, oops, one more time here. Sorry about that. There it is. Finally got it to come up. Yay! Animations. I was like, why are you not up there? Apparently I forgot to push the button. So that's the valley of the Rephaim. Think about where that is in relationship to two very important cities in our story. Right between Jerusalem and Bethlehem. How far away is Bethlehem from Jerusalem, people? 6 miles. It's really close. Now, 1 Samuel 17:4. Then a champion came out of the camps of the Philistines named Goliath from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span, right? They trot out this dude. He is quite tall. He is also from where? Where's the orange line terminate? Gath. What did we hear about Joshua's summary statement? They got rid of all the Anakim in the land of Israel and Judah except for what?
Some in Gath.
Some in Gath. We left some in Gath.
Two of them.
Yeah, we left a few over there, right? It's a problem because why? These people are still humongous, right? How many years has it been from Joshua to David, by the way? Couple? 40, 38 years, 37 years?
You said 100 earlier.
It's been a lot, right? It's a handful of generations, right? And so these people, and they become the Philistines, which are a pain in their side for that whole period of time. Now, of course, the fun thing about this is that what happens? He gets wiped out. So, the heritage of this whole thing, that's Gath. And then we get this sort of summary statement afterward in 1 Chronicles 24-8. It happened afterwards. War broke out with Gezer with the Philistines, and then these various people start to whack these people down. There was a war at Gath again, and there was a man of great stature, at 24 fingers and toes, 6 fingers on each hand, 6 fingers on each foot, and he had also been born to the giants. He reproached Israel, so Jonathan, son of Shimei, David's brother, struck him down. These were born to the giants in Gath. They fell by the hand of David, by the hand of his servants. Now, interestingly, right, again, this is the last time the word giants is used in the Old Testament, in this term. Again, look at the description. This guy, he struck down Lamai, the brother of Goliath. Again, the shaft of whose spear was like a weaver's beam. So there's been various people sit there and say, well, look, at the end of the day, you know, if you're 6'2", 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", whatever, you know, and just slightly in the upper mid sixes, right? You're going to look like a giant to somebody whose average height is what? 5 foot, right? So to your mom, your dad always looked like a giant, which probably is why she loved him, right? So from that perspective, That's great. I'm 6 something. There's no way I'm using a spear whose shaft is like a weaver's beam. Okay, forget if you're 6 something and you can use a weaver's beam as the shaft of your, and again, talk about the weight of the armor and the weight of the head of this, it's a completely useless weapon. I can make one sort of lunging sweep with it and they're gonna rip me apart, right?
Like, how big is a weaver's beam?
They're big. I mean, this is the thing. It's not the shuttle that goes back and forth. It's the thing that holds the tension. It's the tension of the whole thing. So just look at a giant loom. These things are amazing. Renee's got some pictures of some looms that we saw when we were in
Turkey.
Finland. No, it wasn't Finland. It was Norway, something like this.
Some Baltic country.
I think it was Norway.
Norway, yeah. These are incredible. So I mean, these are whopping big machines, right? And some of this, right? So this is not small stuff. Anyway, I'm looking at this going, everything we've seen so far is consistent with what? Are these big people?
Big.
Extraordinarily big people, right? Not just big, tall, big, strong, right? Fearsome men of renown, men of a name, sort of a deal, right? So on your chart, you can sit there and say exception to heritage creates the problem. And David finally is the one who does what? He wraps this up. At the end of David, when David gets done with this summary in 1 Chronicles, what's left of the giants in the land? Zilch, right? So good. So now we go backwards again, one more time. Now, by the way, Hebron, way down here. The Valley of Rephaim, there's Hebron, all the way down there at the bottom. Okay, so now we move on to Og of Bashan. This line, we're going to trace this out real quick here, because this has got some interesting things. So, only Og, the king of Bashan, remained of the remnant of the Rephaim. Behold, now this is before the summary statement in Joshua. Behold, his bedstead was an iron bedstead. It is in Rabbah of the sons of Ammon, which is now further south, so down here in Moab. Okay, its length was 9 cubits, its width was 4 cubits by ordinary cubit. So in case you don't know what a cubit is, they reiterate, it's 12 feet according to a normal foot. I mean, just to make sure that you, again, it's like when you go through Genesis chapter 6, he goes through and he lays out every single day, so you can't miss the fact that every single day is important. And he's measuring it by days, blah, blah, blah. So he's being redundant, so you don't miss that this is a cubit in the ordinary sense of a cubit. Now, again, these people are down here to the south. So Ammon is right there, Moab is right there. So somehow this bed from this guy up here, Bashan, has ended up down here. Okay, in one way, shape, or form. Now, again, just because you have a big bed doesn't mean you're a big person, right? But, stay with me. Bashan. The rest of Gilead and all of Bashan, the kingdom of Og, I gave to the half-tribe of Manasseh and all the region of Argob. Concerning all Bashan, it is called the land of the Rephaim. Well, wait a second. I thought the land of Rephaim was just this little chunk of stuff over here, between Jerusalem and Bethlehem. What he's saying is the land of the Rephaim. Now what? If the bed is down here and it goes all the way up here, what is this then considered?
The land of Rephaim.
The land of the Rephaim. And by the way, we saw that the Rephaim, who included the Amim and the Zamzumim, extend further south on this map that's not on here because they were dispossessed by the sons of Lot. Okay? So Bashan is not a person, Bashan is an area. Now, it's way up here in the north on this point. Now, what will happen is that the Israelites will move up. They've already dispossessed, we read that before. Shihon is destroyed at Heshbon, and then the Israelites move up, and Og meets them at Edrei, and of course they get wiped out. And that's the next part of this, the conquest. The territory of Og, king of Bashan, one of the remnant of the Rephaim, who lived at Ashroth and Edrei and ruled over Mount Hermon, which is way up here, okay? And Sekal and all of Bashan as far as the border of the Gerishites and the Mahakathites, and half of Gilead as far as the border of Shihon, king of Heshbon. So basically he's saying this is his southern border, and then he describes his northwest and east borders. Now, again, that's where he's going to get wiped out. Now here's the interesting thing about this. He brings in here this what? His northern border is Mount Hermon. What's Mount Hermon? Well, we'll bring up, I think, there it is, that's Mount Hermon way up there, right? Now, when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he was asking the disciples, who do you say that the Son of Man is? They said, well, some say John the Baptist, others Elijah, but others still Jeremiah or one of the prophets. In fact, that will be his term when he comes into the city, his final week. The Israelites, the Jews, call Jesus what? King? Messiah? They call him a prophet. Consistently. They've missed it. He shows up as a king, identifies himself as a king, does the work of a king, and all they will grant him is, well, he's kind of special. He said to them, but who do you say I am? And Simon Peter answered, said, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. In Matthew, Mark, and Luke, this is the first time that that term Messiah is applied by his disciples to Jesus, and he accepts it as such. Now, he's been called that in the Gospels by other people. Who are those other people? We'll sit there and say, you are the Son of the Most High. Demons. Yes, exactly right. Sad, right? John's Gospel starts with he's the Messiah. John chapter 1, Nathaniel's like, he's the Messiah. Philip, woohoo, he's the Messiah, come see me. It just starts at a different point. But Matthew, Mark, and Luke, it's been a process of revealing and discovering, and things change after the Mount of Transfiguration. 6 days later, Jesus brought with him Peter, James, and John, his brother, led them onto a high mountain by themselves. He was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun. Garments became white as light. And behold, Moses and Elijah appeared to them, talking with them. Now again, you can scour the Gospels. There's nowhere it sits there and says what the name of the mountain was. But where are they? Caesarea Philippi is just right there. What's the closest high mountain? Hermon. I mean, and it's like it's a no-brainer. Tabor is a mountain that's mentioned otherwise in the Gospels. It is 2,000 feet, not even. I mean, if you stretch at the top, it's like, trying to get on a ride at Six Flags. It makes it to the 2,000 foot level, right? Hermon's 9,000 feet. It's the biggest thing there. When Renee and I went there, it was covered with snow all the way to the bottom. It was amazing, right? It's a big old deal. Now, from that perspective, that's what's really interesting about it, because again, Hermon carries with it a bunch of weight. And this is why I quoted 1 Enoch 6:1-6, because it sounds a lot like what? It came to pass. I'm on page 12 of your notes. It came to pass when the sons of men had increased that in those days there were born to them fair and beautiful daughters. Stop right there. What does that sound like? Genesis chapter 6, 1-4, right? The angels, the sons of heaven, saw them and desired them. They said to one another, come, let us choose for ourselves wives from the children of men. Let us beget for ourselves children. Again, it sounds just like Genesis 6, 1-4. And Semyaza, by the way, did Sam get that name right?
I don't
He owes me $1.
He didn't talk about it.
He did. See, I knew he would. Semziah, who was their leader, said to them, I fear that you may not wish this deed to be done, that I alone will pay for this great sin. This is me, by the way, in junior high. I wanted to skip one period and go see the Air Force band do a second concert, as opposed to going to what I was supposed to go to. But if I did it by myself, I knew I'd be in trouble. So I talked like another 40 of us into doing it.
So you wouldn't be known.
With the idea that I wouldn't be known, and two, there's no way they'll suspend all 40 of us. They still did. And they all answered and said, well, we'll swear an oath and bind one another with curses so I not to alter this plan but to carry it out effectively. They all swore together, bound one another with curses, and they were in all 200. They came down on Ardis, which is the summit of Mount Hermon. Wow. Now again, is Enoch scripture? No. Shake your head. No. Not at all, right? Now it's in the Catholic Bible. It's Apocrypha, right?
There's lots of things.
But that doesn't make it important in any way, shape, or form. The point of this is to sit there and say it's what? It's extant to their world view. It is part of how they think about the geography of their land. If I were to sit there and say to you guys that I was visited by an alien last night, how would you take that?
Was it on Mount Hermon?
Was I on Mount Hermon last night?
That's the question. You tell us.
The answer is no. It was at my house. An alien visited me at my house. How would you take that?
You drank too much.
Yes, exactly. You guys are, so what do I mean by alien? illegal alien or outer space alien. Okay? Right? Everybody, we're all going to think in terms of outer space alien, right? They came down, was looking for like a cow, found me instead, right? This is how this thing works. But are there real aliens that we know of? Do we have any definitive proof of it? None. But again, it's part of our worldview culture, right? So again, Enoch doesn't have to be scripture to still have what? An impact on how they think about this. And the impact is so great that both Peter and in particular Jude essentially quote it. So it's real enough for them in the first century to understand the import of Mount Hermon. But that's not all. But wait, there's more. Because we set up this premise to sit there and say the flood was intended to do what? Wipe out these demonized rulers. Okay? And yet, when we get to the promised land in Kadesh Barnea, they're not everywhere anymore. They're one place in particular. So now let's work our way backwards. We'll start with Joshua 15:13. He gave to Caleb the sons of, what's his bucket? A portion among the sons of Judah, any blah, blah, blah. Namely, he gives them what? Kiriath Arba. Arba being the father of Anak. That is Hebron. So, this is Caleb getting that city. Now let's go back a bit. Jacob came to his father Isaac at Mamre of Kiriath Arba. That is Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac had sojourned. What is this moment in time? Genesis 35:27 is the what? Death of Isaac. Isaac is buried here in Kiriath Arba. Go back 23:2. Sarah died in Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. Abraham came and mourned for Sarah and wept for her. Again, Sarah dies, is buried specifically in the cave of Machpelah. Again, a modern day site in Hebron. You can go and visit it. She passes away in where? Kiriath Arba. Genesis 13:18. Then Abraham moved his tent and came and lived at the oaks of Mamre, which are in Hebron, and there he built an altar to Yahweh. When does Abram settle in this area? Do y'all know what happens in Genesis 13?
Is this after he comes back from Egypt?
Yeah, some of that. The biggest part of this really is that in Genesis 13:14 through 17, Yahweh says to Abraham, after Lot had separated from him, lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward, southward, eastward, and westward. For all the land which you see, I will give to you and your seed forever. I will make your seed as the dust of the earth, so if anyone can number the dust of the earth, then your seed will also be numbered. Arise, walk about the land through its length and breadth, for I will give it to you. Who else heard that?
Lot.
Not Lot, he's gone. Stop thinking in one realm at a time.
The angels must have heard it.
Jacob is not even born
The
yet.
angels heard it.
The demons heard it too. The enemy heard it too. Right? Yahweh's just told Abraham to walk the land, and everything he sees is his territory. What is it called? Kiriath Arba? Like it has been consistently called through everything we've done so far today? In Abraham's day, what is it called? The Oaks of Mamre. He gives it the designation which the Israelites would understand, but it isn't called Kiriath Arba. Why? Because the bad bunnies haven't moved in yet. Right? The enemy, by the time Sarah dies, the enemy is done what? They're on the move. Oh, this is where the battle's going to take place in the promised land? Then guess what? We'll be there first, because you've also already told Abraham it's going to be what? 400 years before you show up. Plenty of time to dig in. Right? Our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, the authorities, the powers, the principalities, etc., etc. This is the battlefield, the promised land. And just as God wiped out the earth because they were everywhere, he then sends Israel up and says, I will dispossess them, but you're going to be my instrument to do what? Rebuild it. Utterly destroy them. So that when you come in, the land is clean, and it's free of foreign gods, and it is my inheritance and your place where you get to shine and be the nation that will do what? Draw everybody and everything back to me. Do you see the power of this? But we miss it if we look at one kingdom at a time, one realm at a time. And that was the reason we asked the question, of our 4 major questions, what's the purpose of the kingdom? And if we sit there and you ask most everybody else, what's the purpose of the kingdom? We're saying, well, one, that's kind of a stupid question, because, well, I mean, why would you even ask that question? But the answer they'll give you is because why? The best case answer for the answer to the purpose of the kingdom is simply this. It's to fulfill the promises made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The only reason the kingdom exists is to do what? Because God's obligated himself. But that begs the question, why did God obligate himself? That's why we're asking the question. Why did God obligate himself to a kingdom to begin with? And it's because he has to be basically vindicated in every realm where he's apparently suffered a defeat. His first defeat did not occur in the garden. His first defeat occurred where? In the heavenly places. This is the answer. And again, if you look with kingdom eyes, you see it. Which then leads us on to what? David, the Davidic covenant. If the Mosaic covenant is conditional, we know what's going to happen. They're going to fail, right? By definition. That's why there are twice the number of curses as there are promises, right? Because he knows this is what's going to happen. But the Davidic covenant is what? Is it conditional? It's unconditional, right? Now, Psalm 89, I used it to basically summarize the Davidic covenant. And I'll just read through a handful of these because I think it's important to make sure you understand. And I want you to, again, look with kingdom eyes. I will sing of the loving kindness of Yahweh forever. From generation to generation I will make your faithfulness known with my mouth. I have said, loving kindness will be built up forever. In the heavens you will establish your faithfulness. In the heavens. I have cut a covenant with my chosen. This is God. I have sworn to David my servant, I will establish your seed forever and build up your throne from generation to generation. Again, where we heard this term before, your seed forever.
Genesis.
All the way back to Genesis 3, right? David is the latest to get the specifics of the seed. Later on in the psalm, the heavens will praise your wonders, O Yahweh. By the way, okay, this is the whole reason our 13th unit is all about worship. Because if you understand the kingdom rightly, that's what you should be thinking. Your faithfulness also in the assembly of the holy ones. Now again, all of a sudden, in the assembly of the holy ones, where have we heard that phrase before?
Job.
Job, exactly right. But more importantly, unit 6, right? Where we talked about what? These 2 agents, right? And again, there's the unseen people behind it. For who in the sky is comparable to Yahweh? Who among the sons of the mighty is like Yahweh? A God greatly dreaded in the council of the holy ones. Again, this is back to Psalm 82. And fearsome above all those who are around him. O Yahweh, God of hosts, who is like you? O mighty Yah, your faithfulness also surrounds you. So again, there's the 2 realms. 89, 19 through 29. Formerly you spoke in a vision to your holy ones, and you said, I have bestowed help to a mighty one. I have exalted one chosen from the people. I have found David my servant. With my holy oil I have anointed him. With whom my hand will be established, my arm also will strengthen him. The enemy will not deceive him, nor the sons of unrighteousness afflict him. But I shall crush his adversaries before him and strike those who hate him. Again, where do we see those verbs? Genesis again. My faithfulness, my loving kindness will be with him, and my name will be his, and in my name his horn will be exalted. I shall also set his hand on the sea and his right hand on the rivers. He will call to me, you are my Father, my God, and the rock of my salvation. I shall also make him my firstborn, the highest of the kings of the earth. My loving kindness I will keep him forever, and my covenant shall be confirmed to him. So I will set up his seed to endure forever, his throne as the days of heaven. David's son Solomon is the only son of David who's specifically chosen by God to be king of Israel. Isn't that amazing? Once. All right? The kingdom under Solomon reaches its height of glory, power, and prestige. When we did our initial introduction of the kingdom, we talked about the land and its borders. And it's under Solomon that the land gets to its largest extent. But did it completely fill the borders? Not yet. Not quite, right? Under the first three kings, each of which who hold an appointment to the throne directly by Yahweh, because God basically specifically picks Saul, David, and Solomon. This kingdom is now taking off like a rocket. I want to read you this quote from A. McLean in his Greatness of the Kingdom. Just listen to this. From Saul to Solomon, there was almost an incredible expansion and transformation of the nation of Israel. In the words of Bright, Samuel Bright, he quotes, "In one brief generation, she had been transformed from a loose, disjointed tribal league fighting for its life into a united, self-conscious nation of some importance in the world. Most of the land thought of as the promised land was now in Israelite hands, a fact she never forgot. Literature and culture flourished as never before, and there was an unexampled material prosperity. It was a proud thing to be an Israelite in the 10th century." And then McLean picks up, "The tremendous military achievements of David cleared the way for the more peaceful work of Solomon. The Philistines, perennial and powerful foes of Israel, were decisively defeated and brought under subjection. The city of Jerusalem was captured, made the new capital of the nation. The conquest of the Palestinian cities was now complete. Across the Jordan, the troublesome kingdoms of Moab, Ammon, and Edom were reduced to tributaries. Other kings, watching with concern the progress of this new power, came prudently to seek peace. Occupying a highly strategic geographical location in the ancient world, it is literally on the crossroads of humanity. The kingdom of Israel had swiftly become a compact political factor which could not be ignored by any of the surrounding nations. The kingdom has come. In David's son, what's the problem? His first act is what? Beyond dedicating the temple, he marries an Egyptian princess. And then he asks for wisdom. And then he asks for wisdom. Pretty much like how I do everything, right? And what does he bring with his foreign wife? Foreign gods. So by the time we get to Josiah, and when we did this in the Minor Prophets, and we'll have much more of this next week as we look at the anticipatory kingdom from the Israeli perspective. It is Solomon who sets up not just a place to worship his Egyptian wife's gods, but many, many others. It's sad. The wisest person who does the stupidest of things.
Many wives with many gods.
Many wives with many gods, many foreign entanglements. Is what happens to the nation after Solomon?
Splits.
No longer a nation. Splits in two directions, right? And so, as we left with this summary, again, looking at Unit 6, we had the command to rule, the fall, and the promise. This is the humanity side of the house. But the humanity and the Elohim come together, which necessitates the flood, the table of nations, and the tower, the calling of Abraham to create something brand new. Unit 8, the Mosaic law given to make them unique, distinct, and attractive. The conquest does most of the work, but David finishes up the rest. And David, because he's a man after God's own heart, gets the extension of the seed. But the result, his first son, right out of the gate, screws it up, and we're left with a divided kingdom. And from this point forward, it'll sound a lot more familiar, I think, in class, okay? Because now we move into territory that we're more familiar with, which is the anticipatory kingdom. From both Israel's perspective and then the churches. So, questions, comments on today's lesson? I think we're done early.
Just so you know, I looked it up because it's driving me crazy. The spear, so a javelin in the Olympics is roughly 1.8 pounds, okay?
Yep.
The beam, the average, it was 2 to 2.5 inches across.
Yeah.
And would have weighed 20 to 26 pounds.
Yeah, chunk that a mile.
12 to 14 javelins put together.
Yeah.
You get into the weight class.
Yeah. So chunk one of those puppies, the length of a football
Oh,
field,
and
right?
and he was 9.5 feet tall, so
Yeah.
the comparison's probably about right.
Probably about right. Yeah, exactly. Stunning. Yes.
There's a
Good, thank you, Scott.
YouTube channel. I'm trying to remember the name of it. I think it's Expedition Bible. It's this guy that just spends a lot of time doing archaeology kind of in that area. And I just have really loved it. So he had one episode on the Oaks of Mamre, and so he found where he thinks they built the altar.
Okay.
There's an altar there. There's these massive just holes still there in the ground from where they think the root system of these massive trees existed.
Okay.
So that, you know, kind of one of the pieces of evidence, stuff like that. He also did one on giants, and they found these spearheads that are insane in
Enormous,
like a gap
outrageously
kind of
large.
area.
Yeah, outrageously large.
Outrageously large, and the secular things say must have been used for decoration, but they all they show signs of wear, stuff like that. They also found chainmail armor that is in the same weight class as they highlight Goliath's armor. I think they talk about how much his armor weighs after he was killed and stuff like that. So anyway, it's very, very interesting. So Expedition Bible, he does episodes on all these things. They went to Sodom and Gomorrah and found just these sulfur balls everywhere that you could just light on fire and see it burn everywhere and stuff. So very, very cool.
Awesome, excellent, great. Fantastic. Well, we're gonna hand out Unit 9. Did you have a question?
Yeah, Dr. Tom, did you hear about him?
I did, yes. So you want to tell the class why we should be praying? I was thinking he said he was going to try and be here today.
Yeah,
So.
well, I think he's supposed to wait there. He broke his Achilles, and he's gonna have surgery, and Debbie's mother broke her back, and she had surgery.
Okay.
Tom will be on the same floor,
Oh, gosh.
have the same nurses.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, so.
So Tom broke his Achilles, which is an unusual term because normally you tear your Achilles.
He said rupture.
What happened?
Ruptured?
What happened is that he was carrying a box down the stairs and he misstepped. He did not actually tear his Achilles. He broke the bone. The Achilles is attached to his heel.
Yeah, sorry.
So his Achilles is still attached, just not the bone anymore. So, and, you know, it's a little bit like that Cowboys injury where you literally tore a bone apart and the tendon survived. So he's going to have a surgery to repair all that. Yes.
Doing a master with his sister-in-law, and they're making something down to them. They'll be out for 2 weeks, and
Awesome. Excellent, thank you. So with that, let's pray real quick and wrap up. Father, we lift up the Cottrells in particular and pray for them. And there are, again, this is a class full of people who have a lot of needs, Lord, and listen to our prayers, respond, and again, be the God who hears, and in this week, show us, again, demonstrable proof that, again, you love us and care for us, just to encourage our faith this week as we head out. In your son's name, amen.
Great job.
Who's missing?
I need 2 more.